Hey there, it's John Wallace, and I am here today for an exciting interview with two special people. This is Jordan and Andrea Sutton, and they lead a rich and warm and vibrant community in Mesquite called Clear Path Church. And so I'm excited to have you guys here. You're my first video interview on my new website, and so I'm excited about that. I have known Jordan and Andrea, my wife and I have known Jordan and Andrea about probably over 6 years, probably closer to 7 years. And so great to have you.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to, first of all, let you guys give a brief bio, just some of your heritage and your background.
You want to go first? I'll go.
You go first.
Yeah, so I grew up in church and grew up with a really amazing family. Grew up with grandparents who were in the ministry and did ministry together for over 65 years, and with parents that were amazing people and business leaders in our church community. And so from young age, I had two things I wanted to do. I wanted to work for my dad, and I wanted to be a pastor. I wanted to be in ministry. Actually, probably when I was younger, I more had in mind of being an overseas missionary, but I sort of had always imagined myself in a place.
So always from a young age.
Yeah, from a place of leading in the church, and so
Great heritage. Yeah. What about you, Andrea?
I'm kind of in the same boat. I grew up in a Christian home. We were always at church and always involved in Sunday school ministry. My parents led our Sunday school ministry at our church, and so Jordan and I met when I was about 16, and we just kind of transitioned churches.
You still look 16.
Well, thank you. And so we started dating when I was 16, been married now for 11 years, dated for a while before that, obviously, and now we have 3 beautiful babies, and we've been leading Clear Path for about 10 years.
Yeah, almost 10 years.
I was pregnant with our first baby. She's due with our first baby the month that we started Clear Path, so I can kind of always go back from there. So 10 years. Yeah.
Let's pick it up there. Why did you start Clear Path Church, and how did you start it?
I don't know really why or how we did start it.
I was 22, almost 23. We were very young, and just felt like the Lord was calling us to do it. It did not make sense in any way, shape, or form other than we just felt like God was leading us to do it. And we had some really good support systems that were with us, people that have been with us from the very beginning, and so it's just been a blessing to start from there and watch it grow. So.
Yeah, we I think that pretty much sums it up. We just felt like God was leading us to, and we had asked a lot of the people who were in our life, and nobody had any big reservations, and so we just went forward with what we felt like God was telling us to do.
Did you start as a house church, or where did you start?
We did first have a meeting with some friends where we prayed in their home, and you know, the thing about it is a lot of churches, I think at the time, were starting kind of as an extension or a church plant of a church. And we were at a church where we had a good relationship with the church and the pastor, and I had talked to him about this sort of vision of planting a church, and he said he would explore doing something satellite oriented, but he was like, I don't think that's what's in your heart. And so we didn't, so we were blessed by the church, but it wasn't like we were going to be stood up and here's people sent out.
Right.
And so we had some meetings. We had a meeting in a friend's home. We had some meetings in my parents' home, and we kind of just gathered some people. Our goal was to not take or invite people from our church or any church really, and just sort of let God bring some people together. And so I wouldn't say it started out as a house church, but the first meetings were in
homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we weren't like sent out, so it was like okay, we have one couple, and now we have like, okay, another few people. It wasn't here's $100,000 and you know 50 people. It was sort of a slow and organic start.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the vision for the church and then the big transition that you went through a couple of years ago.
I guess I'll answer that. We, you know, I'd say kind of give you a little history to lead up to the vision. The first 2 or 3 years of church, by the way, you know, looking at, you know, we've done this for almost 10 years. I think you and I have known each other for closer to 8 or 9 years at this point. But the first 2 or 3 years were pretty much hell. They were really difficult. No, that's probably an exaggeration, but we didn't know what we were doing. And you know, early on we had some friends of ours and Tiffany who came on to help us lead worship and pastor the church as well, as an associate pastor. And that really was a significant thing for us. But you know, the first few years were a bit of a challenge. God grew things. I would say then there were a 3-year period after that, 3 or 4 year period after that, where we really had plugged into what was happening at Bethel in Redding, California, and we started seeing miracles, and we started growing in the gifts of the Spirit. We all grew up believing in the gifts of the Spirit, believing in all those things, but during that time we just saw flourishing of those things, you know, powerful worship, and then I would say that our vision during that time was to really give people an encounter with God, which that has stayed. But a couple years ago, we felt like we were praying nightly during a season. We had, I think it was 4 nights a week, we had prayer in our home, and we'd sort of shut down everything we were doing. And actually we were in a service, a worship service, and I felt like God said to me, I want you to let everything die that's not of me. And I looked at the time, I think it was 8:22, and the Lord said, turn to Matthew 8:22. And Matthew 8:22 says, let the dead bury the dead, come follow me. And so I took that as cue of God, what does that mean? And so that prompted this season of praying and seeking God for what he had for our church. And what we felt like was that God was saying to us, if you had never seen church before and you wanted people to look like me, what would you do? And so from that emerged this thought that we would make the home the central place of gathering for the church, and that from that place there would be extension of, you know, gospel living, there would be community, but that we would also keep the central place of gathering as a part of what we're doing.
Corporate worship.
To encounter God. And so a couple years ago, we took the church through, 2.5 years ago, we took the church through a transition of our house churches meeting on Sunday morning, and instead of being the secondary thing, those being the primary thing. And so that sort of defines a little bit of the flavor of what we are now, is that we want to lead people into encounter with God, but we also want to lead people into encounter of God through community. And so we have sort of a hybrid of your, you know, church that meets on a Sunday gathering point, but also you know, focusing on those house churches.
What do you think have been the pros and the cons of going to that model?
Well, I think it was just a challenge, number one, because you're doing something one way for many years, and you have these relationships with people.
Well, and most churches in Dallas are doing it that way too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the expected thing, the norm. And you know, it was going well for us too. It wasn't like, you know, we were struggling and needed to find something else. This was just something we felt the Lord was leading us into. And so I think one of the cons would be, well, you know, people are like, whoa, okay. So we're gonna do this. And we had so much great support with the people in our congregation for sure, but we definitely lost some people in that process who, you know, this specific model just wasn't, you know, what the Lord was calling them to necessarily. So that was definitely a struggle, you know, seeing relationships that you had for several years decide to go do something different. And so that was hard. But I think we've seen just so much fruit and growth in people's lives, just in this model of really digging deep with people. And you know, in house church, like people have this opportunity to really ask those questions that maybe are in the back of their minds and they don't always get to work through in maybe a congregation setting. So we're sitting at the table and we're working through these things together and we're discussing, and it's just more of like this individual ownership and involvement in people's own faith. And so I think it's just been really cool to see people grow from just that opportunity. So I think that's a big pro for me.
I think that you were asking about like what was the difficult or, you know, the cons of it. I feel like that for me, kind of to what Andrea said, I'm a relationally wired person. And so, you know, when people move on and you're a pastor, you know, that like there's some period of years where it hits you at sort of a pride level of like, you know, where it's bothersome because, you know, it diminishes the size of your church or it makes you feel like you're not, you know, doing a good enough job. But I think at this point in life, the harder part was just the losing of consistent relationship with people that we really loved and appreciated. And also just like doing something different, it really, I felt the weight of, you know, house church leaders that we're working with that were going through significant pains and problems with people and going through, you know, major pastoring situations. And I, you know, that would tax them and put pressure on them. And so then, you know, I'm working with them through that, and I feel like this, oh my gosh, like I've put this weight on people that's really difficult to bear. But what I would say what has happened through that is that tension typically grows us. And so I feel like maturity has come not only for us, but for our church as a whole. So
I would think that kind of thing not only draws out maturity, but it would draw out gifting as well, perhaps that have been lying dormant in people's lives as well. Well, this has been super. I really appreciate you guys sharing with us. How can people get in touch with you all?
Yeah, if you want to get in touch with us, you can go to clearpathdallas.com. We have different house churches that are around the eastern part of the Dallas city, so like, you know, East Dallas, Garland, Mesquite, Rowlett, Rockwell, that kind of part of the city. And they can reach out either to the house church leaders on there, or they can reach out directly to the main contact page. And you know,
all of our social media is on there as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Any following groups.
Good.
Information
They're all
is all there. All of our news and
Super.
everything is there.
All right. Well, I love you guys very much, and thanks for doing this for me.
Yeah.
Okay?
We love
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Thanks.
Love you.
Yeah.